Welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are focusing on an NFL draft and a fantasy football with the Gridiron Scholar, John Laub, co-host of the NFL Draft Bible. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thanks for having me on. I'm so excited. It's a good time of the year now. With the draft behind us, training camps haven't opened up. I get to enjoy more family time. The spring's here, but it also is time to research for the upcoming season, but I can do it at my own pace. I'm not like under a deadline. I mean, I've got my Debbie rankings out. I got my college fantasy football rankings out. And now I'll start watching film. If I have half an hour and I want to watch, I'll just Hendon Hooker. I'll break down some Hendon Hooker. But you know what? If my wife wants to do something or the kids need, I don't have to do it. It's not like it's just a really nice, relaxing time of the year. But I still get to enjoy football, but it's not that deadline pressure.
Tell you what, yeah, I mean, I can definitely feel the passion. And we talked a little bit offline. You've done this for how many years now?
This is my 9th year doing draft stuff with football diehards, and my 3rd year with the rookie big board.
Yeah, I mean, taking a look at the football diehards, we're definitely going to dig into a lot of that. Great, articles on their info. It really goes beyond a lot of the stuff that I've seen. So I'm excited to kind of dig into that with you and everything. But before we do that, let's go ahead and just kind of an overview. When you look at the draft, I mean, are there any teams that maybe got better than others? I mean, it's hard to say like winners and losers at this point, right? But are there any teams that you kind of like what they did more than others?
Well, there's one that I'm very ecstatic about, and it's the New Jets. And I've been writing about this. I've been talking about this. And I'm not a guy who's drafted the last. I played fantasy football for 35 years. I have not drafted a lot of New York Jets. The best one I ever drafted was Curtis Martin when he came over from the New England, and he had a couple years there where he led the league in rushing one time at 31 years of age. And I remember I got him as a 6th-round draft pick. I'm not usually into drafting running backs at 31, but Martin was special, and I just liked the Jets offensive line that year. So I'm not one with a lot of Jets history. I live in the tri-state area. My best friend's a Jet fan. I don't leave drafts with Jets. However, my job is a fantasy analyst. What I've seen from this organization is they've learned from their mistakes. They drafted Mark Sanchez, and at the time, oh my God, why can't I remember? Rex Ryan was the head coach, defensive guy. So what did Rex Ryan and the Jets organization do? If you look at those drafts, every year they took, other than Sanchez, they took a defensive player in the 1st round and total domination of defensive side of the football. And then they draft, and he got the 2 AFC championship games, but he didn't develop as much as he should have. They never put playmakers. I think Thomas Jones, was that his best running back? Then he had like Sean Green. I don't even know if Jones was on those. It might have been before Sanchez, but there's no one memorable on the New York Jets offense from those, Sanchez years.
You just brought up a couple running backs close to my heart. Thomas Jones, former Bear.
He was good, man.
And Sean Green, former Iowa Hawkeye. So
yes. And no receivers that were ever worthwhile anything. So then they draft Sam Darnold. And what do they do again, my friend? Their best wide receiver was, I think, a 4th-round pick, Robbie Anderson from Temple. I mean, and I like Robbie Anderson, but we're not talking a big-time prospect, right? We're talking a player from Temple who was a sneaky draft pick who turned out to be good, right? Good, not great, good. Never gave Sam Darnold a running back. Just no running back. I mean, I'm sorry. Yep. The best friend of any young, I'm an old man and I'll be here forever saying this. The best friend of a quarterback is a running back. The tight ends, forget about the wide. Yeah, you give a young quarterback, you give that player a running back who can make a difference. You don't think LT helped Phillip Rivers develop in San Diego? You're not paying any attention. When Phillip Rivers was in trouble as a young quarterback, he could dump that ball to LT. John Elway won 2 Super Bowls late in his career. Why? He had Terrell Davis. I mean, you can't give these young quarterbacks nothing in the running game. So they blew it with Sam Darnold. Same mistake with Sanchez. Well, what's impressive right now? One, they built the offensive line over 19 and 20. Now, Becton has to be Becton, and that's a big if. He has not lived up. He needs to stay on the field. If he can stay on the field, he's a good player. I don't know if he's an all-pro, Hall of Famer, but he needs to stay. When you're a number 1 draft pick at left tackle, you've got to perform on the field, at least be a top 15 tackle in the NFL. Yes, ideally he's a top 5, but we don't know that. But stay on the field, young man. So that's a big if. But they built that offensive line. It's nice. If you look at other than Becton, they got players in the Jets, and I think they were sneakily last year like a top 10 offensive line in Pro Football Focus. They're not a bad line. So then what did they do? Hey, they got Corey Davis. He couldn't stay on the field. It didn't work out. But he's a veteran, and he's better than nothing. Like, you need a guy like that. Last year, they drafted Elijah Moore in the 2nd round. He had that 5 or 6 game stretch in the middle of the season. He was amazing. Now, I was very high on Elijah Moore coming out of Mississippi, my number 4 wide receiver in the draft. I thought the Jets got a steal. He got hurt late in the season. But he's a legitimate NFL wide receiver. So what did the Jets do that was so good? They go out, they get Garrett Wilson. He was my number 1 wide receiver on the board. No questions asked in my book. Love Garrett Wilson. What do they do more importantly? They got the young man a running game. Breece Hall, I think he's terrific. I graded him as my 4th highest running back in the last 9 years. I can tell you I saw LT at TCU, but I didn't have anything published. It was just my thoughts. So when I only use the last 9 years because all of that is up on Football Die Hard, so I don't think it's fair for me to use a player who I don't have a record, right? So in the last 9 years, I believe the top 4, the top 3 are necessarily this order. Saquon, and forget about what he's done in the NFL. The prospect is different. Jonathan Taylor and Ezekiel Elliott. And then it's Breece Hall. He's a 3-down back. He's a short yardage back, pass catching back. He's everything that you want. You cannot play a season with Michael Carter as your full-time back. That's
really
he's not big enough.
Okay, because he did show some flashes though last year, didn't he?
He did, but you can't give him 25 carries or 25 touches, I should say. Breece Hall can be, you probably don't want, but let's say 17 carries, 4 receptions every week. He's got the body, the athleticism, the physical demand. Then you can bring in Michael Hall, 4 rushes, 5 rushes, 3 or 4 receptions. That's what he's explosive at. I like Michael Carter, but you are not going to an AFC Championship game with Michael Carter as your lead back. You needed the big guy. Go ahead.
When you've kind of studied, this over the years, do you think it will take Breece Hall a little bit to kind of maybe take control that way of the running, game in New York? Maybe start off with Michael Carter and then kind of get him worked in, or, are they just going to throw him in right away?
So it's interesting. I wish I hope I can go to training camp. I'd throw him in right away. These backs are young. He played 3 years at Iowa State. He also has some carries, not a ton, not as much as Jonathan Taylor, but he's got some carries. Why do I mention that? The NFL running back is a short lifespan, my friend. If you get 5 years out of a running back nowadays, you're doing darn good, right? So I'm going to use Breece Hall from day one, unless for whatever reason he can't pick up the blitz or do something that I can't. I thought he did well enough on film. The NFL's a different game. But if he comes in and he can handle the blitz and the playbook, I'm playing him day one, my friend. He's got all the tools that you want. I thought the Colts wasted too much time getting Jonathan Taylor on the field.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs got Clyde Edwards. Remember, the Chiefs took Clyde Edwards-Helaire and put him on right away. He had that 3-touchdown game, I think that. Well, remember that opening Thursday night and everyone went gaga? And then it's been all downhill, right? Well, why wouldn't you do that with Breece Hall? He's what you want. Adrian Peterson of the Vikings. Put him. I mean, when you get the stud, my friend, I'm not playing around. I mean, what the Colts did was kind of weird, but I'm not in the Colts training camp. I'm not really sure what they were thinking, but they finally realized, okay, put him on, right? Like, play the young man.
Mm-hmm.
When you have Adrian Peterson, and Breece Hall isn't Adrian Peterson, I'm not trying to say that, but when you have that player, give him the damn ball. I mean, just stop playing games.
Well, speaking of, not playing games, I have your post-draft rankings up here, and, Breece Hall, not surprisingly, A- there. And then you got Garrett Wilson at number 3. Talk about some of these other, players and their fits and your thoughts as well.
So the Garrett Wilson, Drake London, I had Garrett Wilson above Drake London pre-draft. However, Garrett Wilson's got to fight for targets with Elijah Moore, CJ Uzama, Corey Davis, Breece Hall's a pass catcher, Michael Carter's there. So I said, you know what? When you look at the Falcons depth chart, it's going to be a 2-man team. Kyle Pitts and Drake London. I mean, I don't really see what, and they got Cordero Patterson, and we don't know how they're going to use him for sure. But I think Drake London is in line for more targets than Wilson right now. That's why I like London.
When you kind of rank these, do you kind of, obviously in the back of your mind, think of the quarterback situation as well? Like,
oh yeah, I mean, Marcus Mariota was a great prospect. He has not lived up to it. Went to a bad team, just it didn't work in Tennessee. I'm old enough I've seen enough quarterbacks like Mariota, Jim Plunkett, Chris Chandler. I've seen these veteran guys who get a second opportunity in their career. I don't think Mariota's done. I think with this coaching staff, they identified him. Remember, why can't I remember the head coach's name in Atlanta? He was the offense coordinator in Tennessee.
Arthur Smith, yep.
Arthur Smith.
Yep.
So he knew what he was signing. Why would you have signed Mariota if you didn't think he could be your quarterback? It's illogical to do that, right? So Arthur Smith felt comfortable. Hey, I coached a young man in Tennessee. I know what he can do. I'm going to give him a shot here. Desmond Ridder, I don't think is ready from day one, right? They're going to the Falcons are looking at a top quarterback unless Mariota brings the playoffs, which is almost impossible with that roster, right? Feed Mariota to the Lions, at least play him 15 games or 14 games. Maybe if you're 1-12, 1-13, you give Desmond Ridder a shot late in the season. But if Mariota I expect him to play at least the top 10 games. Give me a veteran quarterback with the system he's familiar with. Drake London's going to be peppered with targets. So I like him a ton there.
What about like Kenneth Walker and Treylon Burks and Chris Olave in their fits there?
So Kenneth Walker, the problem is Rashad Penny. If there was no Rashad Penny, I would probably have Kenneth Walker at the A- level, maybe have him 3 because if I knew he was going to get 220 touches, I'm all in. But I can't project that for Kenneth Walker right now. Do I think Penny plays 17 games? History shows me that he can't. Can Penny have 8-9 weeks of extraordinarily good football? Yeah. And that will keep Kenneth Walker's touches low at least the first half of the season. So I can't project the ceiling there.
It'll be interesting too, if the Seahawks defense is not that good, they could
Yes.
be throwing a lot too.
Yeah, so that's the weird. I think Kenneth Walker can catch, but he only had, I think, 18 receptions in college, if my memory serves me. But it's somewhere's there. He has the basic skills, but I can't project a 35 catch season. Plus, we have the monkey wrench of Chris Carson. Now, do I think Carson's going to play? I do not. But let's say Carson plays. He's a good pass catcher.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very good. I mean, if you watched him, was it 2020? He had like 20-yard touchdowns from Russell Wilson on wheel routes and deep passes. Chris Carson's good. So, like, if somehow Carson makes the team, I could see Pete Carroll playing him as a third down back. So so do I think he makes a team? No. But you know what? He could.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take in the floor, right? I have to say, well, what if everything goes wrong with Kenneth Walker? Rashad Penny gets 200 carries. Chris Carson makes the team. Chris Carson gets 35 receptions, right? All of that takes away from Penny or from Walker. Do I think it's likely? No. But I have to consider it.
And what we know of Pete Carroll as well, I mean, if there are a bunch of healthy backs, which has, been the question in Seattle, he's going to use them all, right?
Yes, and he'll give Chris Carson touches if he's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I do think that.
Well, moving on, Treylon Burks. Then that's such an interesting, trade. Treylon Burks. You really like him here, even though he's a rookie quarterback going to whatever Ryan Tannehill is, right? Talk about him a little bit.
So Tannehill's competent. He's as good as the talent around him. Mm-hmm. Like Tannehill, like what I say, he's not a franchise difference maker. He's not John Elway. He's not Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. Or Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to take a bad franchise or a roster that isn't solid and bring them to the Super Bowl. I mean, if you look at those Bronco rosters of 86 to 89, it's ridiculous what Elway did, right? Mm-hmm. Ryan Tannehill can't do that. But if you give Ryan Tannehill like a Super Bowl defense like the 75 Steelers or the Ravens of 2000, and you give him some playmakers like, Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill's a competent NFL quarterback. He just isn't a difference maker. Mm-hmm. So in this system, looking at the depth chart, and if you're listening, try to name 4 wide receivers other than Treylon Burks in Tennessee. It's pretty hard. You've got to assume he's going to get 100 targets. Mm-hmm. They might be short. They might be behind the line of scrimmage. They might be quick screens. But what I do know, if they get the ball in his hands, they get him in one-on-one situations, Treylon Burks is just nasty. Mm-hmm. Is he going to be running slant routes like A.J. Brown? I doubt it. I didn't see it on film. I don't think that's what he excels at. But let him go down the field 30 yards one-on-one. Let him on a quick screens. Let him on quick passes. Get him, in motion. He can be successful. They don't have anyone else. They've got to get the ball in his hands. So I like Burks there. I don't know if he gets 1,000 yards, but 65, 70 catches. I'll take that any day on 95 targets, 105 targets.
Yeah, I think you've sold me on Treylon Burks, and I guess my question too then is, when did you do these rankings? And now with Chris Olave, does that change now with the Jarvis Landry signing?
I did do the rankings about 4 days after the draft. Mm-hmm. This New Orleans is very interesting now because I do think Jarvis Landry helps them a lot. Mm-hmm. But Olave and Landry are night and day. He's going to be your slot blitz pickup, when you have the mad blitz and you need a guy to be open 2 seconds or 1 second, that's Landry. You need a deep, short crossing, or like a long horizontal crossing pattern. You need someone under the linebackers. That's Landry. Olave's there to attack the safeties and attack vertically.
So that's interesting that you bring that up. So I did interview a Saints guy the other day, and he talked about Michael Thomas being in that taking a lot of slants, but part of that was probably because of Drew Brees and not be able to throw it downfield as much.
There is no way Winston is going to be as successful as Drew Brees on those passes. Michael Thomas ate in that 4 to 10 yard zone, just with the big body, the quick slant. That's not Jameis Winston's game, I don't think. Jameis Winston, he likes to sit in that pocket, look in the field, and throw the ball. Now, I do think he's smart enough for the quick blitz pickup. But you don't, and maybe I'm wrong, but you don't draft and trade up for Chris Olave and his skill set and not pepper him with 80 targets deep down the field. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. So I don't think he's competing for targets as much as Landry as he is with Thomas. And here's what I believe. Landry will help him get more first downs, which means more opportunities for Olave. You don't want the Saints to go 1, 2, 3 punt. You want them to dink and dunk with Kamara and Landry, move the sticks, move the chains, and then take their shots. And the more first downs you get, the more shots you get down the field. And that's where Landry helps Olave. Moving the chains, keeping the ball, giving opportunity to the Saints to get the ball down the field later in the game or on the drive.
Now, speaking of another team that really made some wide receiver changes, in the offseason, the Chiefs, moving down on some of your rankings here, I have Skye Moore. You have him as a B. Do you see him, taking targets away from Juju, or how do you kind of see him, getting targets here?
So I'll say right away, I think Juju's very fascinating. I've been targeting Juju because he's late, he's cheap, and he's tethered to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So I like Juju a lot. And Kelsey's still Kelsey. Skye Moore should be better than Mecole Hardman and all the other guy. They lost Pringle. They lost Watkins. Oh, my God. I don't even know who's on the –
Yeah, Pringle went to my Bears. So.
Yeah, so he's not there. Watkins isn't there. So let's say Skye Moore's number 3 or 4 in the pecking order. But you're tethered to Patrick Mahomes. And if Skye Moore's job, because I don't think this is really a good Juju job, if his job is when Mahomes is scrambling, you need one receiver. Their job is to go deep. I don't care where you are in your route. I don't care what your route is. When you see Patrick scrambling, you break it off, and I want you 20 yards down the field. Because we know that Patrick Mahomes can get you the ball 20 yards down the field. Now, that used to be Tyreek Hill a lot. And how many times did we see Mahomes kind of running, buying time, looking around, and all of a sudden, bam, he just hits Tyreek Hill.
Well, a lot of times he would throw it up and, Tyreek Hill would adjust and
Yes. If that's Skye Moore's job, and you say, I don't think that's Juju. I think Juju is a route runner. He beats the zone. Juju, get in this spot, win with your body. He's not the guy you're going to say when Patrick Mahomes, you want a speed guy. You want a guy to get behind the safeties. That's Skye Moore. Now, coming from Western Michigan, to go to the big boy level, and expect him to be a superstar right away, I think is tough. Can he develop into one? Yes. He left early. His production was amazing. Second round draft capital. And he's attached to Patrick Mahomes. I like Skye Moore a lot.
Well, we'll get back to some of your other ones first, but kind of on that note, looking at Christian Watson, so I am a Bears fan, full disclosure, living in Wisconsin. So, so I'm hearing all this, it doesn't matter who the wide receivers are for the Packers, and they're all excited for Christian Watson. And, when I looked at the draft, I would have been, happy to have Christian Watson in the Bears, with the Bears. And you talked about Skye Moore coming from, smaller level, and, Christian Watson coming from NDSU. And I know them really well because I used to live in the Fargo area and whatnot. And what are you seeing? I mean, is it going to take him a little while to adjust to an NFL and to an Aaron Rodgers ball?
I think it's more Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's going to have to learn the playbook, but from what I understand, the young man works hard, and his dad played in the NFL. I think he was a safety or a defensive back. He's been around the NFL game and locker rooms, so I think he should be able to, and maybe you limit him, maybe instead of having 5 route choices, he has 2, right? So you can use these young receivers more intelligently, but I think it's more Rodgers. Rodgers has high expectations for receivers. He expects receivers to cut off routes and do things that might not be intuitive right away. Maybe, remember, Devontae Adams didn't really pop till his 3rd year in Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, they had a nice depth chart. They had some players on the team. I think Cobb was still more in his prime when he got there. But I wonder how much it was getting used to Rodgers and that offense for Adams. And then it all clicked, right? I just have a hard time thinking to myself that Watson's going to come in there and have it all click that quickly with Aaron Rodgers. I just think that's a lot to ask for a young man out of FCS.
Absolutely. And, he's going to need to have some role, with the rest of the, they really don't have a lot. So it's going to be interesting with that. And, speaking of interesting as well, I mean, the Lions, it had a really interesting and I think a really good draft. I like some of their younger players. And where do you see Jamison Williams fitting in? And is he going to, be ready right away? I mean, what are you hearing and seeing?
So what I'm reading is Jamison Williams wants to get on the field right away, and he's expected to be ahead of whatever the schedule the doctors made. I'm going to say this. Please don't do that. You don't have to do it.
Mm-mm.
We're looking at an 8-year career. We need this young man to be great down the road. Put him on the pup. Let him come off week 4 or 6. He'll give your offense a jolt. Let him get used to the speed of the game. Let him understand what you're doing on offense. He can change your offense 100% with his ability to attack the safeties deep and get over the top. I've said this a bunch of times. Jamison Williams is what the Raiders thought Henry Ruggs was.
Mm-hmm.
If Jamison Williams is everything that Las Vegas wanted in Henry Ruggs. Jamison is a better prospect than Henry Ruggs. He's a better route runner than Henry Ruggs. I think he's even faster than Henry Ruggs, even though we don't have a time on him. Give him time to be healthy. Don't worry about one season. You're not going to the Super Bowl right now. I think you can win games without him early. Get to 3-4, get to 3-3, then put the young man on the field and give him 4 or 5 targets every week. But I think the ceiling is there in the long run. Just he's going to need time to develop.
Yeah, and there were so many wide receivers in this draft, and I'm not one who does mock drafts, and when it came, there were a lot of people that were thinking, maybe Jahan Dotson would, either go to the Bears, and I didn't like that fit because he seemed almost be identical to what Darnell Mooney is.
He is too close.
Yeah, and so I'm glad they didn't go with him. Where do you see him fitting, alongside Terry McLaurin there?
So I'm a big Dotson fan. I had a first round grade. He's a little undersized. I think he's 178. I wish he had gotten to that 200 and no, I mean like 185 would have like Garrett Wilson, a little bigger, but I saw toughness on film. I saw hands on film. I saw second level separation on film. He's not perfect, but the NFL took him in the first round. He's got Terry McLaurin. Why is that important? Dotson's not going to see the number one cornerback on the opposition. Terry McLaurin's job is going to be to eat and occupy that other corner. That leaves Jahan Dotson in more advantageous circumstances. I don't think Wentz is great, but Wentz, wasn't he like 24 touchdowns and 5 interceptions last year? Like his numbers, and I get you can't lose to Jacksonville. And I understand why they did what they did because, you hear the stories now coming out of Indianapolis. They didn't get along, the coaching staff, right? So there's other things swirling around Wentz. But if Wentz beats Jacksonville and wins a playoff game, he's still in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
What it allowed them to do is it gave them the excuse to get rid of him. Carson Wentz is good enough. And now you got McLaurin, hopefully a healthy Logan Thomas. You got Dotson. You got, who was the guy last year? Daz Newsome, right? They have him coming from North Carolina, and I thought he was a pretty good player at North Carolina. So if he's your third receiver, that's a lot of speed on that field. Wentz isn't awful. I think people believe if you look at his numbers last year, yes, he choked in the biggest game. I get it. But the fantasy numbers were all right.
From what I was hearing too, interviewing a Colts podcaster, it sounded like they'd already made up their decision, several weeks before the end of the season that they were going to move on.
Oh, okay. And then that was the top. I mean, they didn't have to justify anything at that point.
Yeah. Speaking of, wide receivers that maybe slipped because they were thinking of the Bears obviously were mocked for George Pickens and quite a bit. And there are questions, about his maturity. How do you see him fitting in where he's at now?
So I understand every concern about George Pickens. The maturity is an issue. We've seen the gift, I think, online when he's staring at the TV screen.
Yes.
There's some unfortunate rumors out of Georgia. He didn't like coaching staff, didn't take coaching. We also have an injury. He missed the 2020 season. He missed the 21 and only played in the playoffs in one game. So there are some flags here. But I'll say one thing. He landed with the perfect organization. If anyone can help George Pickens, it's the Steelers. If the organization likes him and they put him in that clubhouse with those coaches and they allow him to mature, I don't know if he's going to be like a 1,500-yard receiver, but in the good Pittsburgh organization, and if they move on from Chase Claypool, which there's a lot of rumors they're going to, he's the guy you like. I mean, how can I bet against Pittsburgh right now? I
would say, sorry, he doesn't have to be the guy either. Deontay Johnson is the guy. I mean, he's that top dog. Yeah.
And they got Pat Freiermuth now and Najee Harris. So I'm banking that the Steelers know what they're doing. Now, no team is perfect, right? They got James Washington, didn't work out. But if I'm banking on an organization to identify the right guy and put it together, it is the Steelers. And this is what I kind of comp it to. Remember Randy Moss coming out of Marshall, and there were rumors, and does he smoke pot, and is he the right attitude? And the Titans could Kevin Dyson over him in that draft. And I think he went number 18. What I loved about him, and I'm so old, I drafted Randy Moss in a keeper league, and people thought I was crazy, my teammates. Like, you can't draft a wide receiver. I'm like, no, Randy Moss is not your typical wide receiver.
Mm-mm.
Anyways, not only did I love the talent, but he ended up with Dennis Green, Jake Reed, and Chris Carter. He ended up in a good locker room with a good organization that used his talent and was able to yet let the young man grow. Pickens is in a spot where if he chooses, or if the Steelers can get through to him on an adult level, he's in the right position to succeed. So do I know that? No. But do I want to bank on that organization? I will.
Well, yeah, and you look at it, obviously there's questions with the quarterback. I mean, whether Trubisky, starts, whether Pickett does, but this is an organization that obviously the quarterback matters, but this is an organization that has that longevity, just everything that in that coaching staff that you trust him.
Yeah, yes, I do. I trust them to do the right thing to help the young man forward.
Now, speaking of another player that went to a fantastic organization, we figured they would go running back. James Cook. How do you like him? Where he landed?
I couldn't have asked for a better spot.
Mm-hmm.
That was obviously one of the key spots. Now, I like Singletary, and I don't know if Cook right away is going to be the full-time back. I don't think he will. But and Singletary won me 2 championships last year because I was getting him in like round 10. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was free last year, and I kept him. I never cut him because you can't cut a guy on the Bills who's the number 1 back. And he was hot down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're asking me, other than like the Jets, the Bills are probably the most ideal landing spot, maybe even better. But Cook isn't the prospect of Hall. But when you're with Josh Allen, you're with a good organization. He's a pass-catching back. Most of us play in PPR leagues. I'm chasing upside. I'm going to chase upside with a guy like Josh Allen. I'm just and Sean McDermott. Mm-hmm. They know what they're doing right now. I'm going to trust the organization. And I think he's in a timeshare at worst second half of the season. Maybe Singletary opens the year up getting the majority of the touches. Then there's always injuries. I mean, what if Singletary gets hurt? And James, so I'll take the opportunity there.
Well, speaking of, kind of opportunities, and you did a Twitter poll, and you have this on your article up at, footballdiehards.com. And you did this poll of biggest rookie riser in the first 3 rounds of dynasty drafts. Talk about some of these players and, what your thoughts are on them.
So I did find it fascinating that Alex Pierce, the Twitterverse, voted. Look at that, 47.2%.
Mm-hmm.
You see the landing spot. You have Matt Ryan, competent veteran, and you have Michael Pittman, the star on the other side. Alex Pierce does not have to jump into the starring role like maybe Kristen Watson does. And I think people might have been nervous because they didn't know who Pierce was coming from Cincinnati, or maybe they just were unsure because the production profile wasn't good. He got drafted on athletic profile, not production profile. So I think people were scared off. But look, after that landing spot, people loved them a ton. Now, if I had a vote, and you don't get a vote, if you do Twitter, you don't get a vote in your own poll. I would have voted Davis Price, Terry and Davis Price. Look, the production profile at LSU was not pretty. And I saw him run at LSU, and I can't say I was like impressed. I probably had him in my top 20 running backs. I don't remember the exact number. If you asked me to bet that he was going to be a day 2, I would have said no way. I thought he was a day 3, 4th round type of guy. Hey, the 49ers drafted him in the 3rd round. All I know is the Shanahanigans, it's a nightmare dealing with the 49er running backs. Do I like Elijah Mitchell? Absolutely. Are we guaranteed Elijah Mitchell's going to be the back all year long?
Nope.
Do we even know if Trey Sermon's going to make the team? I hope so, but I don't know. It's the shenanigans.
It is.
I mean, if you told me right now, is Tyrone Davis-Price, could he lead the 49ers in rushing? I would say, yeah, there's a 28% chance that he could.
Oh, yeah. Last year we wouldn't have known about Elijah Mitchell.
No,
so, yeah.
No. So when I see that, and I know the history of the Shanahans, and this even goes back to his dad with Denver, his dad with, the Washington Commanders, formerly the Redskins, I will just say that there's a chance that this man's going to play.
Mm-hmm.
And if Shanahan identifies him and Shanahan thinks he's his guy, he'll run him to the ground.
And he's a bigger back too, right?
Yeah, he is. Let me see if I can get my give me half a second. Ask me another question. I do what my research if you got the next one.
So, some of those other players, when you look at Patriots wide receivers, and I guess I've had a few rules in fantasy football. Obviously, if you're in a kicker league, always draft kicker later. Obviously, it's a redraft.
Yeah.
Another one of my rules, steadfast, is stay away from Patriots wide receivers.
Yeah.
So why should we be excited about Tyquan Thornton for the Patriots?
Okay, before I answer that, I found it.
Okay.
Davis-Price is 6 feet 2'11". That's NFL size.
Mm-hmm.
Played in the SEC. But I don't love his number. First of all, I don't love his production. And his combine numbers weren't overly impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but Shanahan likes him. He's a one-cut runner. And he's going to get, if he's willing to get smacked, because that's what Shanahan running backs get smacked in that system. If he's willing to take the load, he's going to play if he gets on the field. So he has the body size to do it. So there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You should not be, now to answer your other question, you should not be excited about Tyquan Thornton. I don't have him. I'm not going to have him in one league. I don't trust the Patriots' ability not only to identify wide receivers.
Yes.
I don't trust them to coach them up.
Yep.
They're the anti-Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is about Belichick, his system, the coaching staff, there is no track record of success. The only players they've had success with are players they signed like Wes Welker, Randy Moss, free agent types. They got Troy Brown, who was just such a great athlete, and I don't know if Belichick even drafted him. He might have been there under Bill Parcells, right? He played for a real long time.
Mm-hmm.
Deion Branch was always good, but never great. And I'm exaggerating. Was there 8 failures from New England at the wide receiver? We'll start with N'Keal Harry.
Oh,
so
yeah.
There is no reason in your right mind as a fantasy owner to believe that a speedster from Baylor is going to break the mold of every other Belichick decision. I'm not going to get bamboozled. I'm not going to fall for the It's not a gilded draft pick. I don't believe it. What would make me think that this is the guy that Belichick has figured out? No way, dude. No way.
Well, speaking of another wide receiver you have on this list, Danny Gray, and it's interesting. You kind of, depending on what Debo happens with Debo, he'll probably be there, right? I mean,
yes, I would think.
You look at the receivers, and Danny Gray might have a really good opportunity, to carve out a role, right?
Yeah, so he got I do believe day 2 draft capital, right? He was a 3rd round draft pick. Now, I watched him. I love SMU football. If you play college fantasy football, the Mustangs are outrageous. Danny Gray was a JUCO transfer. So if you look at his production profile and you look at the raw numbers, you might be, only 82 receptions. He played a year at JUCO. Don't worry about that. What I like, 15.3 yards per reception. That's impressive, folks. He had a 68% catch rate. I like that very much. And he had a 22% market share of the passes. And they have a lot of talent and they spread the ball around at SMU because I understand context. Like 22% means different things at different schools. The Mustangs, they have Reggie Roberson. They have, I'm trying to think. Rashid Rice. They have Grant Calcaterra, the tight end. Last year, they had the tight end who ended up getting drafted by the Colts. I can't remember his name right now. So, and they have running backs who pass catch. So when you have 22% of SMU, that's much better than it looks. He ran a 4.33 in the 40. He's got straight line speed. What's more impressive, he ran a 4.37. Just as an example, if I'm looking here, Tyquan Thornton ran a 4.39. Danny Gray ran a 4.37 in the 20-yard shuttle. Danny Gray is bigger, 5'11", 189. Thornton is a 181, but 6'2", so he's a little skinnier and longer. I like Danny Gray, higher draft capital. Let someone else – no, I'm sorry. Less draft capital, but I'll let someone else take Thornton. I'll grab Danny Gray in round 3 or 4 of dynasty drafts and hope he gets on the field somehow.
Well, tell you what, I mean, it'll be interesting, how much longer this Deebo Samuel stuff goes on, because if they get to, training camp and they like what Danny Gray, is given to them. I mean, you got Jawan Jennings there, but not a lot, behind there. That would be an interesting kind of, spot, especially, if you look at Trey Lance and if he's going to be throwing more and better than Jimmy G, right?
And I'll tell you one thing. Danny Gray's very good in the open field. If you watch him at SMU, you throw him that quick screen with one blocker out front named George Kittle, and you let him get behind that George Kittle block. Danny Gray's dangerous on those. He's dangerous on that type. A little D. He's not Deebo. He's not physical, strong. Deebo's just such a physical, athletic player. He's not that. But Danny Gray will beat you with speed and slipperiness in the open field. He's an interesting player.
Well, speaking of interesting players, we got a ton of stuff here. I definitely appreciate you coming on. Some under the radar prospects that you have here as well, listed in one of your articles on footballdiehards.com.
Yep. Bailey Zappi, but I loved him pre-draft. He lands in New England. The challenge now is, how does he see the field with Mac Jones? The only way he sees the field is if Mac Jones gets injured, and I don't want that to happen. So, but is he going to learn? Yeah. Is this a decent spot? Yeah. This might be a good thing for him. And I think the Patriots took him in the 3rd round, much higher than people expected. So I like him. I like Hassan Haskins a ton.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going, Derrick Henry is spectacular, but the wear and tear in the age is up there. When they brought in, was it Dontrell Hilliard? Was he the back last year? And they brought in Dante Foreman and Hilliard, right?
And AP for a game.
AP, oh my God, the AP. Oh my God, I forgot about that. But those backs are different. Hassan Haskins is almost Derrick Henry light. He's not Derrick Henry. But if you want a guy to grind between the tackles and beat up a defense, that's Hassan Haskins. He can do that for you. I'm very excited about Keontae Ingram landing in Arizona. Obviously, they're not happy with Eno Benjamin. He didn't get on the field much even the year before. He's undersized, and you don't hear a lot about him. But
I would say about Eno, he actually started out at the University of Iowa and then it moved on to Arizona.
Oh, he did?
Yep. I mean,
I didn't know that.
And, Iowa's kind of been known for some running backs, not necessarily succeeding in the NFL, but, in the college rankings and everything. So he didn't necessarily find his way on that depth chart, but he was one that I was hoping would do well in Arizona, but he just hasn't, found a solid role then.
No, he hasn't. I don't expect him to now.
Yeah.
What I like about Ingram, He's 221.
Hmm.
He's 6 foot. I believe he had 2,000 yard seasons in high school. He was going to be the great Longhorns running back. Two things happened. He ended up at Texas when their offensive line was terrible. They were going through a slump. The team wasn't very good. And then they signed this kid named Bijan Robinson. Well, that was it for Ingram. Here's what I like even more about him. He has 89 career receptions in college. He's a much better pass catcher than people give him credit or think about. Keontae Ingram is an NFL pass catcher from day one. He can step on that field. And if you notice the Cardinals, they don't rotate downs. They rotate series. They'll go Connor, then they'll bring in their second back. And why I think they like Ingram, he can pass catch. So now obviously if it's 3rd and 12, 3rd and 20, or they'll bring in maybe the real light scat back. Well, but if they want to move the ball, they'll keep Ingram in for a series.
Well, and that's interesting too, because, Connor seemed to do well when he wasn't the only, back to Keon.
Yes, and they will. So I think Keontae fit their 3-down back much better than Benjamin. Mm-hmm. Plus, he's a goal line back. You can keep him in, I'm literally for 9 plays, and he can do whatever you want him to do physically. Mm-hmm. So I think they like him for that. Now, Kenny Brooks didn't get drafted. That was a little bit of a bummer, but he did sign with, I think, the Eagles. Yep. We just don't know. That's a tough depth chart. They got a lot of good players. Don't know if I love any of them. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott. Who else? Why? Oh, and then they got Jordan Howard. So, does he make the team? I think he makes taxi squad. Let's watch him from there. I absolutely love Khalil Shakir. He ended up in Buffalo, though. I don't think he plays right away. I thought he was capable of getting on the field year one, but I don't think he comes in and plays right away. He needs some time to develop. Jalen Tolbert, love him in Dallas. Oh, my God. Do I love him in Dallas?
Yeah.
Without Michael Gallup, he's going to play, I think, pretty quick. I like Tolbert a ton. Justin Ross, unfortunately, I think the medicals. I said this before the draft. Mm-hmm. We're going to know everything about the medicals. He went undrafted. He didn't even get guaranteed money as a free agent, dude. His medicals must be the dude is going to be paralyzed on the field. And it's bad.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad. So he didn't even get guaranteed money. That's so that hurts. I loved him. And then I see I love Jelani Woods for the athletic upside, but I don't think people are taking the risk. How many times have we seen these athletic upside players who don't amount to anything? Mm-hmm. My friends, don't overdraft Jelani Woods. If you get him in the 3rd or 4th round, I love it. If you're drafting in the 2nd round, it's too risky, my friend. How many times have we seen these guys not make it?
And say he's behind your SMU guy, Kylan Granson, as well. So
yeah, that's it, Kylan Granson. I
found it for you, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why Danny Gray's numbers aren't so bad, because they have pass catching tight ends. And to me, my biggest miss all of last year in Devy and in the draft, Jalen Weidemeyer. I cannot believe he was so bad athletically. I don't even know what to say. I didn't see that on film, but tight end can obviously be tricky. He was undrafted. I thought he'd at least get 5th or 6th round. I'm like, oh my God. They really don't like Jalen Weidemeyer. He should have stayed in school, man.
Well, tell you what, we're going to have to do a part 2, because this is so much good stuff. I definitely appreciate you coming on. And where can everyone find you again?
Thanks, my friend. I had a blast tonight. anytime over the summer. As we spoke before, I'm a teacher, so I got about 3 weeks left of school, so I have a lot of time in June, July, and August, which is very nice. So it'll be a pleasure to come on, my friend. Please follow me on Twitter at Gridiron Scholar 91. I couldn't afford the A and the R. Feel free to hit me up with any questions, anything you ask. I have my Devy rankings right now on the Rookie Big Board. If you you had mentioned the draft seminar, they're on the YouTube channel. So you can find the Rookie Big Board if you just go to Google. It's a Patreon page. All my Devy rankings are there. And then go to YouTube and you can see all the players we talked about today. My teammate, Matt Hicks, and I broke them down in 10-minute videos. So you can see all those. They were pre-draft. So we break it down athletically. And my written profiles, as Andy mentioned, are on thefootballdiehards.com.
I love it. We're definitely going to have to connect again this summer. I appreciate you coming on. And once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the NFL Draft. Thanks again, John Laub.
I appreciate it, Andy.
Have a good night.